Here we go. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Angie Abreu over here. Thank you for joining us on today's writing workshop. I guess Dominican Mother's Day did impact today because we had like 20 people signed up and, we only have 9 who have just come in, but Leslie is here. Leslie and I met a few years ago. I think it was during the Dominican Writers Conference. She was one of the facilitators who offered a writing workshop for our authors. And we've been following each other's work ever since. I think it was the last year I was part of the Monterey Book Festival. So Leslie is a fiction writer from Trinidad and Tobago. She created Brown Girl Book Lover. If you don't know her Instagram account or her TikTok, please go follow Leslie, okay? Leslie got time for this, okay? She is a social media platform where she interviews diverse writers and reviews books that should be at the forefront of our imagination. She also produces a monthly newsletter, Come Get Your Diversity, okay? Leslie Ann is currently working on her first novel, This Has Made Us Beautiful. She is published in Poets and Writers, Zone 3, Plowshare, Brittle Friends. Oh, there's a bunch of Brittle Paper, Obsidian Literary Magazine, Salamander Literary Magazine. And Leslie has also taught creative writing in France, Trinidad and Tobago, South Africa, China, and New York City. And now for the Dominican writers. She is currently the Director of Education Program at Bard's Prison Initiative. Welcome, Leslie. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad that we have like a lot of time. Usually I'm doing this workshop in an hour, so I'm really happy. We will get started. So we're going to be doing some writing and some sharing. I'm going to share my screen with you. Share multiple participants. Okay. 1 second. Share. You see my screen? Voila, let's do it like this. Okay. Welcome to Turning Memories into Transformational Stories. Okay, so I want to talk about the workshop norms, and then we will go into like our writing prompts. So a few workshop prompts. When talking about a writer's work, talk about what you liked and what worked. We don't critique a writer's work because it's a work in progress. Listen to listen rather than just waiting to speak. Be brave, push yourself to contribute, even if your thoughts aren't fully formulated, because you learn about the craft of writing by talking about it. So what we're going to do is very different from writing prompts, I like to say, right? Because I created it. It's all like an architecture of a short story, which can be a nonfiction piece or a short story, which can be plot out into something longer, right? And I do this because I want emerging writers to see the interconnections between what they're doing. Sometimes with prompts, they're very, they're not connected. So you cannot see the threads and you cannot develop something wider. My ultimate goal is that when you finish this workshop, you can see like, oh, wow, I have a longer piece. I can make it into something, right? So the first prompt is scan your personal history and pick out 3 or 5 significant memories that stick out to you. Make a list of these memories. You can add a little details, your age, time period, where you lived, etc. But you're not embellishing, you're just making a list. So we're making a list of our personal history, aka memories that stand out to us. And sometimes these memories come to us all the time, like we're doing something so mundane and they come to us, right? these are the memories that really significantly change us. So I'll give you about like 7 minutes to make a list of these memories. Okay, you have 3 more minutes. Okay. Um, let's briefly talk about this, right? Because sometimes these memories that come up for us are like excruciating and more traumatic. Sometimes these memory that comes up are not, right? Sometimes we associate all personal history and memories with pain, unfortunately, right? So let's talk about like what came up, how do you feel, and what is on your list? Who would like to talk? You can unmute yourself and talk.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a mixture of both.
Mhm.
I started out with happy memories. I was born and raised in New York, so that's pretty much the setting of all of my memories, even though I live in Miami now. So my first memory was just hot summer days, walking to play badminton with my sister's friends, and being young, 5 years old, and not really being a part of it, but just walking and being the viewer of her playing with her friends. I remember walking to tap dancing lessons at, I think it was a YMCA, and hating it, but just the memory of walking in Queens, which seems to be a common theme. Uh, I remember parties at the house where, Dominicans don't really seem to need a reason. It's Saturday, so we're having a party and having just a house full of cousins. That's a memory. I also remember jumping on the bed with my brother and breaking his wrist on accident. But not ever feeling any anger with, like, he was never angry that it happened. I was probably about 11. And I remember Sweet 16, not wanting to have the party, not wanting to have the practices, um, and being there and just being angry for the whole 3 months. So those are the memories.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love the theme of walking, right? Because in New York, you're always walking. You don't even know that's part of your memory. Yeah. Anyone else would like to share what came up for them?
I can share.
Thank you so much.
A really beautiful memory, actually. My father used to visit us during Christmas time from the US when we lived in Santo Domingo. And at one point, my mom locked him out, and he convinced several people to go and serenade my mom. Doña Josefa, ábrame la puerta. And it's one of my favorite memories of him as a child, that he was so charming that way and so beautiful that way. So that came up. And I really like this because I want to compare that moment in time to the realities of the United States and kind of draw upon that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Yeah, and I think with those memories, as you said, you can juxtapose two things, right? Which is nice. It gives you a lot of context. I really like that. I do believe that, wait, sorry, let me rephrase that. In writing, we have to really go deep into our memories and see the bigger picture, see that this memory, how this memory connects to the history at large, how this memory shaped me, and really understand yourself and your family or whoever is part of that memory as individual and as a collective. And I do think a big part of writing is investigating these moments, even though some of them are sore or some of them are joyful. We have to investigate them, right? So it's really imperative, because I think through that investigation, we understand like a wider context, and we understand how, like, what do we really want to say about this memory? and how we can use this memory to pull out and write like a really great essay or short story, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now we're going to get into the second prompt, and you'll have some time and then we'll share. So I want you to go back to your list and choose the memory that's pulsating and you have a lot to say about it. Spend a few minutes not examining that memory, but living in that moment. It may feel uncomfortable, but we write from a place of uncomfort to highlight important issues to our readers, right? Let me put this down. Write down the incident as you remember it. Straight facts, no chaser. Who was there? What happened? What was the resolution? What was the conflict? Again, many times when we're going into memories, we start analyzing the memories before getting into the memory and seeing how it feels, what was actually there, right? So when we start analyzing the memories, we miss so many things. So what I want you to do is to go back into that memory and place yourself. You're not analyzing. You're like as if you were there, as if it's happening right now. And just write down everything, okay? I'll give you a little bit of time, like 7 minutes, and then we will share. Hi, for the person who came on, we're just working on the second prompt, so you can start working on it, and I'll go back. We have like about 5 more minutes on this prompt.
Thank you.
Sorry, please remember to mute yourself.
Sure. Now I can give you a little history of the McDonald's.
You have 2 more minutes. Okay, let's get started. So, sorry, Rosita, you came in before. I'll show you the prompt before, where we were just investigating a memory, a list of memories that come to the forefront of our mind, and just writing it down with a list. And now we chose one memory to really write about. So, second prompt. First, let's talk about how was it just writing, and then we will talk about you will read for us. How was it just writing, going into that memory and just writing?
I could share on that aspect.
Go for it.
I found it a little bit difficult, just because I was trying to write about the memory as it happened. So like placing myself and like seeing the scenery and like experiencing that moment. And already my memory has so much stillness in it, and it was hard to like not try to embellish it, just go with the facts, talk about what happened. So it was a little bit challenging, but it was also worth it.
Yeah, why was it worth it?
Just because it's a memory that's been like haunting me. Like it's been like it's always there for me. And it's just like being able to like see it and experience it. It was like it gave me that mental clarity, and then I know like now I can embellish it because now I'm more clear about it.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing that, right? That's why this is how you can, this is the transformative powers of memory. This is how we can use memory to talk about wider subject matters, right? The personal is political, yes, but also the personal is personal. And like when someone's telling you a joke and you weren't there and you're like, okay, it's funny, but they're like cracking up, they were there in that moment. So when we're talking about our memory, how do we expand it for others to feel it, others to understand it, and to see the connection? Partly is like adding on other things, right? Looking at how this memory, this time of your life and this memory is connected to something political, connected to something cultural, connected to all these other things that can broaden it. But before we get to like your memory being broad, we have to go into that memory, sit in it, and just write everything out without interpreting it, because the interpretation will come and last, right? Someone else, tell us about how was it going in that memory and just writing it.
I can go.
Go for it.
Hi. So I started writing the memory. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I started writing this memory. This memory is like over 40 years old. And I've always thought about it. And I started writing it, describing it. And somehow, for the first time, I actually felt myself in it, in describing it. And it brought tears. It's not a sad memory. I just realized it is a sad memory, but I always saw it as a good memory. But I actually felt this individual. I felt my body like fusing with this individual, and a level of comfort that I was never used to. It's a person that I helped. I'd never seen this person before. I had never seen this person before. I was walking in the city by myself, and an elderly person just motioned to me without speaking to help him cross the street. I must have been about 13 or 14. And, you know, at that age, kids are sometimes embarrassed to help someone else. And I had never really experienced empathy or love in my family. But I helped this individual, and it is the first time I ever felt empathy and joy, helping someone. And this memory, I always thought of it like it was one of the best gifts life has given me, because it shaped my life and it helped me, you know, use all of my sorrows to help others. But I never realized that it wasn't just holding his hands like you would a stranger. We actually interlocked and leaned on each other. And I realized that I never really saw his face because I was staring so much into his eyes. So I started writing it as a memory, but it turned into my actually feeling like I was there right now, and thinking of things that I had not remembered, and I'm just remembering now.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And that is really powerful. And, you know, like when you're writing it and you're right there, imagine what the readers are going to feel when you start expanding it, right? They're going to be right there. And I love it because for many reasons, right? How it taught you many things, but also I think sometimes when, you know, doing this class, like people think the memory needs to be like traumatic, knockdown fight, like, you know, and be like, I was like, no, girl. And she was not like, no, girl, no. The memory can be very subtle. It can feel really plain. But when you start going deeper and deeper, it can have a bigger meaning, right? Because it starts off this young girl walking this older person across the street. You're like, yeah. But then you hear about the empathy and all these things. You're like, wow, that's a story, right? And I'm glad that you shared that. I'm glad that, you know, Diane shared about jumping on the bed with her brother. I'm glad that we're sharing these memories because these memories may appear just like really regular, but they have a lot of deeper context. So I love that. And thank you for sharing. Okay. Who wants to read? So how we would do this is like someone would read the entire memory and we'll just comment on like what we like, what we hear, what we feel. We're not critiquing, right? Because again, these are work in progress. So I'm going into the chat.
May I talk about my progress, my process?
Go for it. Yeah.
When I write the memory, yes, I also go into it and it's all in the present. And I see things, I see details that I had like totally, just, gone by the wayside. But I put it all in there, how I'm feeling, my questions, my doubts, my observations. Like the last one I wrote, which I did not write here, so I'm not sharing it unless you say it's okay. Details like someone's face, their reaction about what is going on. I wrote about the day when my mother organized a rejection, total family rejection against me. And I found myself at home being all by myself, and everybody else had gone wherever they went. I never really knew. And that's part of my doubts and my questions. Where did they go? They said they were going to the aunt's house, but that is highly not likely because we never went there at night. Trying to remember, I knew it was a school day because that's when I began to get the sense that something was going on. My sister and I were on the school bus. We would always get dropped home. And this time my sister did not get off with me. So like, wait a minute, what's going on? The driver's reaction, he seemed like, he knew what was happening. And I couldn't see the matron. It was a nun, the sister's face I couldn't see because she was looking the other way. So like real details, like who's who and what they're doing, and this is happening. What's on the what am I reading in their faces when this is happening? That is like so important. That's some of the details.
Yeah.
And then just finding myself totally at home. It was a huge family, and like, oh, that mansion all by myself. My grandmother must have been home, but she never came to assist me. And I know that because she never went out. And so who did came was the family cook, but I couldn't let her near me because I was attracted to her. I was afraid I would grab her. I was so needy. I was so wanting the comfort that she was offering me, but I couldn't allow myself that. So all the feelings, the prohibitions, the taboos, that was a taboo, I couldn't touch it. I couldn't go there. And it's very healing because in the process of writing, I give myself permission to see what I saw, to feel what I felt, which half the time, because it's so painful, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that. That makes me sad. I have to deal with, whatever I'm doing, my cooking, my schoolwork, whatever. My responsibilities of the day. But the writing allows me, gives me permission to sit down and go back there and say it like it was for me. And that is very healing.
Yeah.
And then the final piece to that is that now I feel I own that experience. Before I didn't feel I own it. It just happened, outside of me. I was in it, but it felt like it's me. I was there. It happened to me. And now I'm beginning to look at my mother in a different light. I mean, sometimes she was vicious. So I have stopped making excuses for her. There was no excuse for this. So yeah, it's a wonderful process.
Thank you so much. You said two things that are really important, and I just want to echo, and I say them all the time. First of all, this process is it's healing, like Bell Hooks said, writing is a tool of healing, writing is a tool of resistance, right? And I think in all writing, even if you're writing a short story or you're writing a personal story, it should be a form of healing, right? Trying to understand yourself through these characters, your family through these characters, the world, right? And you said, I think when we're writing essays, right, personal essays, it is about owning your experience. So many times our memories, other people own our memories. Other people are in charge of the experience, and we're seeing the experience through them, right? But I think in going into that memory, sitting down and saying, I'm going to be really objective here. That's the word. I'm going to be really objective here. you start to like see, well, what's really happening?
Mhm.
And that gives you a deep sense of ownership. I want to say one thing before we move on. Yesterday I went to MoMA and I saw the Georgia O'Keeffe painting, and there's this line in like explaining the exhibition and explaining Georgia O'Keeffe, and it says to see takes time.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really love that. And I want us to incorporate this when we are writing in this workshop, but when we're like writing throughout our lives, right? To see takes time. Okay, I'm gonna move on. And then we'll share. Okay, now you're still telling the memory straight, but add sensory details. Let the readers smell it, hear the world outside the narrator's point of POV. Let's see the weather, add color, texture, invoke the feeling. Sometimes the background of our memories are blurry, so try your best to add imagery, add more descriptive words and descriptions, right? Who else was in the room? What time was it? Now, does the sensory details, description, sense of time change the narrator's camera's lens, right? How does it add more to the story? So I really want you to go back into your memory, and this is your time to start the first layer, let's say, of embellishing, right? So we can see like a deeper form of the narrator. We can see it, we can hear it, we can taste it, right? Like we can get more texture to that room. So I'll give about 7 minutes. You'll add these things, and then we'll talk about like how did it change the memory? We'll talk about all these things, and then if people choose, they can read. Okay, I'm giving you 7 minutes. You have 3 more minutes. Okay, let's get started. First we will talk about like what resonated for you in adding like sensory details, etc. And then you can start reading if you would like. So anyone wants to talk about like how was it to go back into that memory and start adding some details?
I can start.
Go for it.
Well, the first thing that came to mind is how much perfume seems to come into things. Because my mother uses the same perfume now, and I walk into her bedroom and it still smells like that. Mind you, we now live in Miami. But this memory that I speak about, I'm writing about the Sweet 16 thing, never ever came to mind until now when I am intentionally bringing myself into that space. And so when I'm thinking about that day, the first thing that came to mind was the smell of white diamond, that faint smell in her bedroom sitting there, and thinking, I'm never going to escape this. Like, this is I felt like Pigpen in the Snoopy cartoon, where that white diamond smell was that cloud that was above me that was just never going to let me go. But I don't think about that now when I go in there. So do I just read it?
Yeah, and you know what? I love how this smell can signal so many things about who your mother is, right? Like there's certain people still I feel that wear perfumes. I would like to get into perfumes. I just didn't have the time, how to pick, how to choose, right? And I feel like it still is a throwback to like femininity, like classic femininity, right? And you can picture this kind of person who's wearing these perfumes, especially white diamond. So that can be used as a deeper and deeper like symbolism and like making of the character. So go for it.
So I'm in my mother's bedroom. It's as neat as a pin because her OCD will not allow it to be anything other than. There's never anything out of place, ever. And the smell of her usual white diamond perfume is in the air, faintly, but there. and I'm sitting in front of her makeup station and hoping that the lessons from Barbizon were worth it, because my dark skin, which is much different than her, and Aunt Dulce's very light skin, makes it difficult for them to help me with this task. And through the neatness and the lovely smell for other people, I only see the chaos in my mind, the sadness in my heart, and the wish to escape this room, to never see another Elizabeth Taylor commercial again, to just let me out of here, to let's get this over with, and to let it be tomorrow.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is just beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, also what strikes me very loudly is the difference in the complexion, but also the whiteness of her perfume.
Oh, didn't even think of that.
Yeah, yeah. Both in the Elizabeth Taylor and the name of the perfume.
Absolutely.
And this is how what you were saying, Leslie, is that right, the personal is political is bigger than what we see here in front of us. You know, and so in the writing it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just beautiful, like just this mom who is like OCD, like everything is clean, everything is perfect, and this kid who needs to be somewhat that way but is not, and like everything that's happening, all the chaos can only happen inside, right? And I think it makes for like a really interesting character, right? And how do you then externalize pain when you have to keep a lot of it in? That's really interesting. And like, you know, if you were to make this into a larger piece, that can be an idea that is revealed throughout the piece. These two juxtaposing parts, right? And this is what makes like your essay, your work longer. This is what like makes it like start connecting to folks, right? Because this is a personal, but when you start exploring that a little bit, right, it starts connecting to folks. And like your work should have many layers. You don't want to like put everything in there, right? Because it becomes exhausting, but it should have many layers. And this can be a layer that is explored, right? Because this layer are connected to the relationship with the narrator and her mother. You want to make your layers feel connected as possible, and feels like this like long thread that everything can be knit back in perfectly. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to share, talk about the process and share? Rosita?
Well, I didn't write anything because I'm busy organizing my files here. But I did write that I don't agree on the process as it is being explained here. It seems too heady. I write it all in one piece. If I go back to edit it, it doesn't have the same rhythm or texture or flavor. So it doesn't match. It just seems like it doesn't belong in there. So I put it all together as I see it. I have time to see because I'm writing. I give myself permission to write, therefore to feel, therefore to see what I remember. And that's the other thing, that I enter the writing with a question mark. What's there? Let's go find out what's there. And so the pieces come up one by one. The texture, the sounds, the smells, I'm afraid I'm gonna grab her feeling. I want to grab her feeling. Right. This is too heady, but that's the way it's taught in, you know, in colleges and stuff. So I'm accepting as is.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. This is wonderful.
No worries. Thank you. Anyone would like to share? Or should we go on? Okay, we're gonna go on. Right. So this comes up with some of like Rosita's, she was just saying about like coming into questions, right? And I want us to pause a minute because we're like in memory, we're like writing, the narrative is taking hold. And sometimes we're writing and we don't stop ourselves to ask these questions. But it's imperative that we do, because these questions help navigate our piece and hopefully navigate it, if you want to be published, navigate it in a way to being published, right? So I want you to step back and think about who is writing the story: the narrator, the writer, the past voice, or the present voice. And if you see, there's a difference between the narrator and the writer, and I'll break it down a little bit. So the narrator of the story, and the writer, even though this is, say, a personal story, these are two different people. The narrator is telling the story from the past, right? And they are essentially part of the story, but they are being really objective. They can be really objective, or they can be really close to the story, impartial, right? But the writer is the one who is writing the story. So the writer, although the writer and the narrator are the same sometimes, especially when you're writing a personal story, you have to think about it as the writer is the one just being told what to do from the narrator. The writer doesn't come in and intrude unless you're doing something that's really clever and avant-garde and different, right? So the story is in the hands of the narrator. The writer comes in when you're editing, right? But also when you're editing, you have to think about, is this edit because I like it, or is this edit connected to the characters, right? Even when you edit in, you have to think about your characters. And one thing important to say is that, like, when you're starting to write a personal story, these people, even if they're alive, they become characters, right? They're no longer independent people, because you are like capturing who they are in that moment and writing about them, right? And this is why it's important to make sure that you represent them correctly, maybe in the essence of who they are, right? But they are characters now. You know, I want to think about it like, if, you know, the Son, the God, the Holy Ghost, I'm not religious, but for some reason we understand that comparison, right? These are three different people, but the same people, right? I think you have to think about it like that. And it's really important, like, you know, ask yourself these questions, because it will help you to determine how does this, you know, essay progress? How does this story progress? Like, I'm working on, you know, a novel right now. And yesterday when I was writing, I was like, wait a minute, who's telling the story? You know, because, like, you know, the narrator in this story is very active, right? And it seems, sometimes it feels like they are omniscient, which is like looking above the story and the characters and knowing how everyone feels. And sometimes they are like third person, which like they're like just inside the person's head a bit. And I have to pay attention to that, right? So like after like I complete the first draft, I have to go back and figure out like this point of view. So it's really important that you start thinking about that now. Who is the narrator? Who is the writer? Right? And what voice do you write it in? Like when you're writing personal narrative nonfiction, it's in the present, it's in the past tense because you're looking back to look forward. But some people use present tense. I read this book all in the present tense. It was a bit strange, but after like 2 chapters, like I got into it. But remember, every tense that you choose limits the character, right? So if you do past tense, if you do a point of view like past tense, it limits it. If you do present tense, it limits it. So you have to figure out what limits do you want to work with and why. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Wait, someone has a question in the chat. It helps me to think of myself as an actor who is then performing out. Okay, someone said something really good in the chat. It helps me to think of myself as an actor who is then performing out a story to deliver a message. Absolutely. Okay, let's jump back into the 4th prompt. Now, pull back and start to examine that memory like a therapist, a spy, someone who was not part of that incident. You can talk about the memory and take it apart, right? I think it's really important for us to take that memory apart so we can then go back in and find things that we didn't add, find those layers, right? Like one layer we just discovered in Diana's piece is like the layers of, what did I just say? Help me out. Anyway, find layers. So when you go back into your piece and you start examining, find layers, right? Like, I think for me with writing, there's always room for improvement. There's always room to add, especially if you want to get it into a publishable piece, right? You always have to like examine everything. So I want us to use this 4th prompt to go back and examine the memory like a therapist, a spy, someone who was not part of that incident. You can talk about the memory and take it apart. What has happened with you before this incident? What was happening? Sorry. How did this memory change you or your core identity? What was happening in the other person's life when this memory happened? What is the problem from your point of view? If there was a problem, what is the problem from their point of view? Can you add more to the narrative to give a full picture, not only from your point of view? And this is important when you're writing personal fiction, because we don't want to be biased, even though we're biased because we're writing this story from our point of view. And we want to give room for the other characters, especially the characters who we are in contention with, right? We want to give them room for the audience to see them and make up their own judgment, right? This is the difference between writing and propaganda, right? And this is why writing is so powerful and reading is so powerful. We want to give the readers room to interpret and understand it on their own, right? So they don't feel forced to follow your argument. And this is what you can do here, right? By like widening up that space and letting us see it from their point of view. Now, we might just agree with your point of view, but you have to give us that space, right? And that's really essential. And you know, it's important to note that like while we're doing this in an hour and a half workshop, when you're writing, this will take a long time, right? Don't do all these things at once. Write, and then edit. And when you're editing, you're thinking about these things. But this is all to give you tools. So when you're in different stages of your writing process. Okay, so I will give you about, let's see what time we have. I'll give you about 5 minutes to start thinking, to start working on the fourth prompt. Okay, thank you, everyone. Would anyone like to share this prompt?
I can finish it off. I feel like it doesn't really make much sense, but
Go for it.
um, all right. So sticking to the Sweet 16. It says here, so uh the God, I can't even read it. Oh, the sulking began at the beginning of the month, through the week and all that day. And as the house filled with damas, with their dresses, with the makeup artists, with the photographers and their equipment, with the family members and their well wishes, all of these things brought with them weight and expectations that I didn't want and I didn't need. And I became solemn and quiet and no longer the witty one. No quips, no cute, sassy stories or sayings. Uh, no stories or sayings. I didn't even have my quote best 20 minutes to give, and I didn't want to. And the rest of the house looked alive from the outside looking in. It looked alive with the preparations and the hustles and the things that you do when you're getting ready for a big party. And oh, how I wish that party was for someone else, because I could get down with getting ready for a party, just not this one. And I wish so much and so many times for an alternative to what this party was going to be. I tried to negotiate another outcome, but no, that was not to be, because I was looked at as being ungrateful, as not being thankful enough for this prize bull that was being given to me. And yet no one understood that I am not competitive, that the ultimate prize was not important, that this party was not important, and that the only person that it was important to was my mother. And so I was supposed to make this the party of the century for her. But I didn't want it. And to this day, looking back, I still didn't want it. And that's kind of where it ended.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Your story would resonate with so many people, right? Like just that
Yes.
obligations you feel compelled to do, or sometimes you have to do for your family.
When it's socially convenient,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I I'm wondering what was the occasion, but I think you said 16th birthday in the title or something.
Yeah, it was the Sweet 16 that I didn't want.
Right.
The big quinceañera that I didn't want.
Right.
It was crazy.
And it's interesting how this has shaped you, right? Because you still have like feelings about it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it made you understand, I think, a lot about yourself and your mother, perhaps.
And it also changed how I raised my children. Do you want this? No? Well, then great. It doesn't matter what grandma says. You don't need to have a Sweet 16. Fine. You're good. You don't want to go to your graduation? That's great. You don't have to, because you know you graduated and I love you for it and congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
And that acknowledgement would have been enough.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And I think that really bothered me.
Yeah. And I think a deep part of the layer of this piece is about voices. You having a voice
or lack thereof.
A lack thereof, right? And voices and needing to control your own narrative, your own destiny, especially when you're 16. You want a deep sense of control. And so if you continue to work on this piece and build it out, that can be another layer you talk about, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes. So I just want to go into like a quick thing. Let's do finally, and you can do this on your own, and I'll send the last like scene via Angie, and she can send it to you. Stay in the scene and ultimately stay in the story. Are directly connected to getting to the core story. When we listen to words in scene, we ask ourselves, what are we trying to do? Where are they leading readers? The story within the story arrives when we stay in the scene, and that's the layers, right? Sometimes the story we set out to tell is not the story we end up writing and getting published. And I think this is hard for us sometimes because that means we have to do more drafts, more rewrites. And, you know, being human, we want everything to be perfect. We want everything to be done right away, right? But that's not like what writing is about, right? So homework, return to that memory and spend 1 hour writing it all down, even if it's painful. Resist the urge to flee. It should be a page or 2. Then step back and circle down the themes, ideas, its connection to history, our culture, etc. Now, this is really important. So, and this is how you move like your work from like just only being personal, is we have to connect, not all the time, but we, as much as possible, connect our work to the larger themes of life. How does this connect to our culture? How does this connect to the history, right? How does this connect to current politics, right? And in your work, you don't have to be like, this is connected, but the more like you expand it and show it for readers to come into that and see it, the better, right? Especially like when you're talking about like just like, you know, in terms of like race in families, right? That, you know, is a present theme right now and forever, right? And how can you use that to give us a different perspective, right? That's really important. Another thing is that like when you're writing and you're going back into the work and you're rereading it, it's really important it's really important when you're like, it's really important to like look at the work objectively as much as possible and circle down the themes that you see, the ideas that are resonating, because those themes, those ideas will help you to build layers, right? The more layered your work is, the more interconnected it feels, the more vast that it feels, that it's bigger. It's like, this story is bigger than me. This story connects to society. The more people will gravitate towards it, the more you're able to publish it, right? But finding out those themes, finding out those layers needs to like be an act of revision and an act of reading over your work. Okay, I will open it up for questions and then we can close out.
Great, Leslie, because I have a big question. I am writing my memoirs, and the big thing that comes up for me is the use of names. Of course, I've decided I am allowing myself to use real names because that helps me, you know, stay with my experience, my memory, my feelings. But if I want to publish, I don't know if I want to include all those real names.
I think when you get to the publishing stage, then you start changing the names. Like I'm working on my novel right now, and most of it is fiction, right? But some people like I met, because the novel is based in Beijing, where I used to live. Some people were so bizarre that they deserve to be in this novel. So I'm using their names to channel them. And my God, it's been so good because like
Yes,
I'm really channeling them.
it feels real.
It
Yeah.
feels real, but like during the editing stages, of course, I'm going to like, change your names, cue them a little bit. But I think if this is a coping strategy that helps you write, do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any thoughts, any feelings, what came up for you? Before we go, I wanted you to do this last thing. Examine what themes keep popping up for you. What is your through line? Like, what is the connection? What is like holding the story together? Who are you writing for? Why is this essay important to tell? What are the text to world connections in this memory? Are you teaching or telling us a story? The thing with personal narrative as opposed to short story, but it still happens in short stories and novels. Many writers believe they should be teaching. And we're not reading stories to be taught. Again, the readers want to come to these conclusions by themselves. So if you're teaching us a story, you need to pull back and figure out who's the writer, who's the narrator, right? Do not write to teach. Write to tell a story and write for the readers to come to their own conclusion. And that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. My name is Leslie Ann Murray. I'm with Brown Girl Book Lover. I guess so. I interview writers. I review short stories with Brown Girl Book Lover, which a platform I created. So follow me, contact me, and that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. And happy Sunday and happy Dominican Mother's Day.
Thank you, Leslie.
so
Thank you so
much.
much.
You're welcome.
I hope everyone enjoyed this workshop today.
Oh, yes.
This was great.
This is my first one, and I have to say, I'm really happy my daughter was like, "You've got to do this, Mom. You've got to do this. I'm signing you up, and I don't care. You're not going to the gym." I am really, really excited to have been a part of this. Thank you so much.
Diana, does your daughter join our other workshops?
I don't know what Quincy does. Her life is very incognito.
How did you find out about this workshop?
My daughter Quincy has been urging me to do this for like forever. And I'm just like, Nina, I don't have time for this. Like, I got 100,000 things to do. And she's like, Mommy, you got to do this. Like, you are a natural storyteller. You've got to do this. And finally she says, I don't care. I'm signing you up and you're doing this. And
look at that.
she's a night owl. And she even texted me this morning at 5:30 in the morning.
Remind you.
And said, oh yeah, at 11, you need to go and make sure that your Zoom is working and you're what? I'm like, what do you do? How are you awake? What are you doing? Like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And with no expectations, I had done another thing at her prompting that I think it was just not me. And I was like, yeah, no expectations, whatever. I am so excited that I did this. I'm so happy that I did. It just was so much fun.
Shout out to your daughter, Quincy.
Yay, Quincy. Yay, Quincy. This was great.
Keep coming back.
Well, I hope to see you again. We're
Absolutely.
here every Sunday at 11 a.m. with a different facilitator, different workshop themes. So we hope to see you come back.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a happy Sunday. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.